Their specialty is translating ancient Tibetan texts about the rainbow light body. We are all ultimately these rainbow light body beings, and this physical flesh and blood body is just a cover for that. It's a way for us to interact in this 3D plane. We will all commit to going full rainbow light body and perhaps return to those higher realms. Also to connect with our immortal or divine self as way, the breath work, meditation, yoga, study, doing research on the history of all of this, visiting sacred places, plant medicine. All of those are the tools of what I call the Star Walkers. These are the beings that know how to activate the body, know how to project their consciousness to other worlds. Look how big that rock is. How'd they move that 500-ton block of granite? That's where I try to live. I'm very interested in that spiritual history of Egypt, and especially the belief that the ancient Egyptians possessed a technology that involved tones, lights, probably medicinal plants or psilocybin mushrooms all over the temples that enable them to activate the light body.
Welcome to Elevated Conversations. In this conversation, we speak with William Henry and we talk about ascension, the transference of the human from our physical form into our rainbow light body, galactic ascension. We talk about the ancient scriptures supporting all of this and so much more. It is one of our favorite conversations. Please enjoy it with us, William Henry. Welcome to Elevated Conversations. Today we have a very special guest. I guess it's special to me because of how the connection came about. Basically, Roxy and I drove 3 hours from cold Santa Monica out into the desert, and we couldn't believe how hot it was. And we were there for a meeting, and there was a conference on, and we had to meet this person at the conference. And I walked into this foyer of this conference with hundreds of people. I sat down, I spoke to one guy, I got one phone number, and today we are absolutely blessed and very grateful to have him on Elevated Conversations for a chat. William Henry, welcome.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Roxy. Yeah, that was so much fun to talk with you that afternoon. It was a real highlight for the weekend for myself and my partner, Julie, as well. We're just like, wow, this beautiful, beautiful couple, lit up couple. So thank you for reaching out and having me on today.
Well, thank you for that. Look, and for some people you'd go so random, yet Roxy and I now more and more as we go like into this journey, we used to be so, personal development, set goals, you got to achieve this, what's my outcome for this or for that? And now we're very much leave it up to the universe, don't be too attached to an outcome. And often things better than we expect come out of that, which is fascinating. Now, I love one of the lines that I heard you say once where you said, you've got to listen to the nudges of the universe, or if you hear that voice for the awakening, otherwise the voice might get louder until boom, something happens, right? Can you sort of share what these awakenings can kind of come through for people like?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea is that we all have this higher self that knows us intimately, sees the past, sees the present, as well as the future, and is always trying to nudge us into right action and to get us to trust ourselves, basically. They call it the still small voice. There's lots of names for it. And one way that it often can express itself is through synchronicity. The other is just simply we've got to listen to it. It's always there for us. We know instinctively when we hear that voice because very often it expresses a message of what would you do if you weren't afraid. It's the lesser voice, the lower voice that looks at the world through fear. It's the higher self that looks at it through the eyes of love and the trust and the recognition that all ways are the ways, and you can't ever really make a mistake. So it's learning to tap into that voice is ultimately a real key to manifestation. It's also a key to our ascension because once again, the ancient thought going back to the Gnostics is this idea that we've already completed our ascension. This isn't something we're going to make happen. It's something that already has happened. It's like the correspondent concept of the light body, of manifesting the light body. It's not something you go get, it's something you already are. And the process of unveiling the light body, revealing the light body, is one of letting go of false perceptions about who we are, the negative self-talk, all of these limiting concepts and ideas that are really distractions to our higher self.
I'd love to hear, William, when you first realized you had a light body and that enormity, you know, that feeling. So I know when I got activated by the word light worker, when Pete's brother said that to us, he said to us, I think I'm a light worker. And that activated something within us. And we had this spontaneous awakening over the phone. And so I'd love to hear that story for you, because it's a beautiful story for a lot of these light workers and way showers that have this realization.
Yeah, I would call myself not an academic or a scholar, but I'm a researcher and historian. So a lot of my work for a lot of years has been about documenting the ancient stories and myths and traditions about ascension and the light body. And this is what took me to Egypt early on. And so one of my first visits to Egypt, it must have been 2002, 2003. I had already started on this path of recognizing that a lot of the ancient Egyptian imagery that you see on the temple walls is reflective of Stargate and wormhole technology.
Mm.
And the next thing I know, I'm on a cruise ship in Luxor, Egypt, and a whirling dervish dancer is performing. And it's an 800-year-old mystic Islamic dance that he's performing. And he's essentially standing in place, but he's rotating. He's in a counter rotating fashion, taking himself into a deep state of meditation so he can connect with his higher self. And in this instance, he pulled out one skirt that really clearly looked like a UFO spinning around his body. And then he pulled out another one that was going in the opposite direction. And it looked exactly like he had turned his body into the shape of a wormhole. And I call it the Wormhole Dance. And I put a video out about this and the connection to the light body vaguely, because I was really not on the light body path yet. But this is where the story is going. And what ultimately happened is I found myself at a conference in California a couple of years later, like 2006. And this lovely couple comes up to me and they introduce themselves. They both have PhDs from the Harvard Divinity School. They work for the Dalai Lama. Their specialty is translating ancient Tibetan texts about the rainbow light body. And they asked me if I knew anything about it. And I said, no, I've never heard of it before. Well, what is it? And they said, well, first of all, it's really funny you don't know anything about it because your work in Egypt answers questions for us that the Tibetans won't answer because it's secret, or they simply don't know the answer about the rainbow light body. And what they said is that according to Tibetan belief, our body was designed to have its frequency accelerated until this body dissolves away and we're left with our 5-colored rainbow light body. And once we attain this light body, they said, we can then travel to any of 13 star systems where this teaching is taught. And what this couple wanted to know, always, which they couldn't get the answer to, was, well, how do they travel once this lama or guru attains this rainbow light body? How do they then travel to these other star systems? And they said they were watching my video about the wormhole dance, and my supposition, my idea that the body was designed to become a wormhole, and that was the start of it. They said that's the answer, and they started sending me all this information, these texts, these books about the rainbow light body, and that just launched me into this whole then scenario, this line of research about helping people to become aware of their light body and the Tibetan belief that it's our divine and our natural state. We are all ultimately these rainbow light body beings, and this physical flesh and blood body is just a cover for that. It's a way for us to interact in this 3D plane. But then ultimately, at some point, we will all commit to going full rainbow light body and perhaps return to those higher realms.
I love it. Oh my God. It's just like so like good because it's like a step up from your look of the light body into a rainbow light body, which is essentially matching the scale of consciousness with the authentic soul, which is the highest frequency. And it's very kid-like, the rainbow bridge, you know, you come down on through the rainbow bridge, and we're going back up through the rainbow bridge analogy.
That is exactly right, Roxy. In fact, I soon after this found myself in the Rubin Museum in Manhattan. This is one of the world's most noted Tibetan art galleries in New York. And it had in there a reproduction of what they call the Dalai Lama's secret temple. When the Dalai Lamas would go and learn about the rainbow light body, they would go into this circular room that used to be behind the Potala Palace there in Tibet. And it's nothing but images. It's 360-degree images. And one of the key ones that they start with is this image of the Lama sitting in a lotus meditative position with this rainbow bridge extending out the crown chakra into another figure that's sitting in a rainbow colored orb. And the message is that's you, that you're always connected to this part of yourself, but many of us just choose to sever that connection for whatever reason. We forget the connection, we don't acknowledge it or whatever, but it's always there for us to make that link. And once we do, now we're operating from the perspective of that rainbow light body rather than the perspective of our physical flesh and blood life.
Wow. Yeah.
It's funny because before this, for the audience, before this, we're talking about the womb caves in Uluru and the vagina being seen in certain aspects of nature. And just as you're talking, I'm like linking this rainbow light body into the womb space, and like it's almost like this is the gateway of the wormhole. The secret ancient wisdom is through this passageway, back up through the column of light, back to the rainbow to get to the other star systems. I mean,
I agree. You know, when people will ask me, I've been on a TV show called Ancient Aliens here in America for 16 seasons of the show, starting the 17th season next week, filming for it. So I've been involved with the show, well, since its inception. And people always ask, what is your number one proof that we've been visited by extraterrestrials in the past? And my answer is our body, our DNA. The very fact that our body is the way it is that evidence. And all of these stories back up this genetic altering of the human body. And in my view, the reason why they were doing that was to make the human body a more conducive vehicle for our ascension and for the attainment of the rainbow light body. And so that is really key. And when people will ask me the question, well, where's your favorite Stargate located? And I'll just go, it's right here. That's what body is from the soul's perspective. It is the stairway to heaven. It is the portal. It is the gateway. And part of our quest as conscious ascenders is to learn to recognize the purpose of our body as that stairway to heaven, and to recognize that many myths and sacred traditions speak of the geography of our body and the importance of our body. There's many stories. For example, when in the Old Testament book of Genesis, when Jacob lays his head on a stone and falls into a dream and sees a ladder ascending into the heavens with angels ascending and descending on either side, that could well be a stone somewhere in Israel, but it's also true that it's our pineal gland, the crystalline stone right in the middle of our brain. And learning how to activate it opens up that stairway to heaven. So that really does speak to the importance of why we incarnate in a body from the soul's perspective, and what we're to do while we're here. We're to understand our body as literally the gateway to heaven.
So certainly understanding, I guess, our spine and our chakras and
Everything.
spiritual balancing, because if we do have this divine connection, right, it's going out through our crown chakra, and so often when we work with people, they can connect to feeling like they're more spiritual than they are physical or emotional or mental, but those three get in the way, You know, it's they got pain in their physical body, or they're emotionally easily triggered, or they got too much stress and their mind gets in the way. But at a spiritual
Absolutely.
level, they're like, oh, I feel like I've got these three things slowing me down, but the fourth, I'm connected. How do I get those three out of the way? Is that what
Yeah.
you think all the different modalities are about? The yoga, the breath work, the people who use plant medicines, etc. They're like ways to get those three sort of out of the way and in balance.
Absolutely. And ways also to connect with our immortal or divine self as way, the breath work, meditation, yoga, study, um, doing research on the history of all of this, visiting sacred places, plant medicine. All of those are the tools of what I call the star walkers. These are the beings that know how to activate the body, know how to project their consciousness to other worlds, and can even take the body with them if they choose to do it, because that was the other part of the Tibetan rainbow light body teaching, is that once these gurus attain this rainbow light body, and the motivation for doing so is because you're going to be able to exude more compassion than not doing it, that once you attain this light body, then you can literally travel to any other star system and then phase back into a physical flesh and blood body in that world if you choose to do so. And again, the reason you would choose to do so, according to the Tibetan tradition, is now you're a being of light and you're here to exude compassion.
And that's, I reflect on the Emerald Tablets when
Mm.
Thoth talks about traveling through the ethers and merging into his light body, leaving the physical vessel behind. And then, as you mentioned, those different galaxies that it could visit, you know, traveling through space and time, moving in circles. I
Yeah.
believe he even talks about, I was moving in circles, you know, transmitting his consciousness. Those beautiful teachings that you've committed your life to studying and understanding. And what I love is you can draw on all of the different countries with their different teachings, beliefs, and understandings, and somewhat bring them into something that people in the day to day, who, I love your term, are conscious ascenders.
Right.
Because I feel like there are some people who are maybe light workers who are excited about this shift in consciousness and very, positive about watching it take place. And then there's like the light warriors who actively want to go in there and go, I'm not just going to watch it, I'm going to take action on this.
Right, right, exactly. And one of the messages that I also try to convey as I look into these various cultures and civilizations that ascension has always been part of the human experience. It's not something new. And that's one reason I wrote my book, Ascension, was because as I was going out, I've been talking about this topic well over 20 years, and it goes in waves. And so like in the year 2000, there was a major wave, 2012 major wave. Now it's like a tsunami compared to what it was back then. The number of people that are rising up and lifting themselves up on this wave is just astounding. And it's what we knew was going to happen. I mean, it's been prophecy. We've been talking about it. We've been anticipating it. But not most, but a fair number of people that are recently, say, getting up on the wave in the tsunami, if you will, weren't aware that, ascension has been a choice for thousands of years. And that the reason why so many extraterrestrial races were involved in affairs was to prepare us for this moment, to help us to awaken to this potential. And of course, not to go any fear-based or negative on this, but there's also another force on the planet that does not want us to ascend, because ascension is not just a rising up and connecting with other conscious beings in other realms. It's about, as I understand it, about attaining a greater sense of wholeness and holiness. And with that comes some extraordinary powers of levitation, ability to control gravity, ability to travel through wormholes. These are all normal human capabilities. And suddenly we're waking up to it and going, well, wow, okay, why not us? And that's where we're at right now, is getting these mass numbers of people into this same frequency, if you will, where everything that we're talking about right now, which for some people is maybe like an advanced kind of concept, will be kindergarten by the time we're done with this in the next 5 years. I mean, I'm already seeing this. I'm having conversations with 11-year-olds that have watched my videos and read books of mine from the past 20 years because their parents had them in their library. And now that this just happened a couple weeks ago, this 11-year-old gave back to me after all of my work for the past 20 years, started asking me questions. And my reply was, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I'm back to you on that because it's like, it's his fundamental base reality at 11 that took me 30 years to kind of piece together. And so now that's where we're at right now is suddenly it's not just people in our age group, it's the younger ones too, that are also coming up with this as their ordinary reality, which is just absolutely just mind-blowing to me.
I remember when we first had our awakening, my youngest son, Harley, was saying that Eskel, a Palladian that we were channeling at the time, was on the rocket ship, the Rainbow rocket ship. And he was up in the sky. And it was just really funny because that's his description as a little 5-year-old, how to link a UFO. He didn't know what the right name was, but he just called it a rocket ship. So they're very aware. And I believe a lot of these kids are thirsty for it, So yeah, I love
I'm
your
a firm
story. It's so
believer
good.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer they've come in ready to go with this, like the cable ready kids of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Now this generation are ascension ready. I mean, it's really beautiful.
So tell us a little bit more about Egypt and stargates that we see in the walls and the UFOs. We were fascinated. We went with Robert Edward
Yeah,
Grant last year to Egypt, and we've only been
beautiful.
once, so we're very rookie in the realms of Egypt and the knowing. So we'd love to dive into the stargates and what else, what other profound information you've found over there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you got to go to Egypt to have that experience because it is such a touchstone. I think of Egypt as the real world. I mean, those pyramids are at least 5,000 years old. They're probably maybe closer to 50,000 years old if some research our colleagues are correct. And I have a sense that they could be. So they've always been there. They're the center of the earth, really, and all of history revolves around the pyramids. I mean, here in Phoenix, where I live, something's old if it was built in 1950. Okay. So, in comparison, this is just a movie set that I live in here in Phoenix, right? You have
Mm.
all the natural beauty, but the stuff that men have built, humans have built, doesn't even compare. So when you're going to Egypt, you're automatically connecting with something very ancient, very sacred, and very real. It's withstood the test of time. And often there's kind of an approach that a lot of people take on tours is they're going with tour leaders that are really into the stones or maybe into the bones, right? Look how big that rock is. How'd they move that 500-ton block of granite? How did they build those boxes in the Serapeum? How did they build the pyramid? It's all mind-blowing kind of engineering sort of questions. And then you come back around to the spiritual side of it. And that's where I try to live. I'm very interested in that spiritual history of Egypt, and especially the belief that the ancient Egyptians possessed a technology that involved tones, light, probably medicinal plants or psilocybin mushrooms all over the temples that enabled them to activate the light body. And that was the purpose of all of the temples, including the pyramids. And so that somewhat changes your perspective a little bit when you're recognizing that you're going to the temples as places to do work. And the work that we're going to Egypt to do is the alchemical work of ultimately manifesting our light body. And everything that you see on those temple walls is related to this. And you're seeing this give and take, this exchange. You're always seeing humans interacting with the divine beings, be it Isis or Osiris, and they're offering to them plants and foods and things like that. And the gods are then offering oils and foods. And it's this exchange of the earthly and the heavenly. But what's in those oil jars that the gods are handing to the humans is the means to ultimately attain our ascension. And that's what's so exciting to me about going to Egypt. I've been there 27 times, going back in October, and we'll do several tours next year in 2025, is the recognition of just how really close I think we are to being able to put the pieces of the puzzle back together and actually begin to utilize it in our own lives. I mean, it's one thing to go and look at a magnificent temple and a block of stone that weighs 200 tons and wonder, how did it get there? It's another to know, okay, this was the consciousness of those people. This is how they thought. This is the parts of the brain they were using that we've suddenly sort of let go, or here are some of the tools and techniques that they were using that we can utilize as well to duplicate what they were able to do.
Mm, I love it. I think I want to come on tour with you, William. When are we going? Seriously, just like the
Spiritual,
deep spiritual, it's a blessing, all of the structures like that was just very big, but I think I'm ready for another trip to deepen the spiritual with what you're talking to.
For sure. And it's so great to have to go with someone like a Robert Grant, who has that mathematical, even engineering kind of approach to it, and others that see that perspective. But then when you layer it with this understanding, that opens up a whole incredible level of experience as
Yeah.
well.
And what I might also add is you walk your talk in terms of your message. And I was joking before we went, live on the call about how I've been, binge watching you before, doing this call. And what I noticed is you're very careful to present your ideas in a way which wouldn't contradict anyone else. I've never heard you run anybody else's theory down, never heard you swear once. And one of my favorite sayings is, what you are speaks so loudly, people can't hear what you're saying. It's the energy of the person. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're obviously practicing, which is compassion in action? I love that term. I think I heard it from you. It's something we try to practice.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's something I actually picked up from the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition, because the gurus, Padmasambhava is the male, his female consort, Yeshisogyal, they're shown holding the Vajra, which is a lightning bolt. It's the power of plasma, the power of the stars, but it also actually means compassion in action, and it refers ultimately to a state of open-heartedness and a recognition of the interconnectedness of all and the power of the heart. And so that was one of those examples of where I recognized, well, let me put it this way. When you see the ancient Egyptian images of the Pharaoh, for example, ascending, they're on what they refer to as the Ark of the Millions of Years, or the Ship of Eternity. It looks just like a wormhole. And it's probably that what it is. If it looks like something, and chances are that's what it is, or at least we're able to interpret it in that way. And they hold the symbol of the key of life, which is equated to the Tibetan Vajra in action. They hold a resurrection staff that looks like a tuning fork, because that's what it is. It tunes them into the resonant frequency of the dimension of the blessed, or Kundalini, the Holy Spirit, exousia. They're all this interchangeable terms for that underlying source field. And those might be actual objects. And by the way, this Pharaoh I'm speaking of also sits on a feathered ascension throne. Well, when you go to the Tibetan imagery and see Padmasambhava, he too is sitting on his lotus throne. He's holding his resurrection staff, and he's got the Vajra in his other hand. And those could well be 3D tools, actual technologies of some kind. But it's also true that, again, the key of life is to live with that open heart. The resurrection staff is, as we said a moment ago, that's our spinal cord. And when we recognize that all of this is internalized, it then opens up the question, well, how then do I live in this way, in this highest possible frequency? And the answer to that is, I think, largely individually specific. Meditation, yoga, places to study, plant medicine, visualization, connecting with these divine ones through sacred art is another really big area that I've done a lot of research in as well. So it's always trying to find a way to live this experience rather than just to read about it and think about it.
I love that. And something that you said there with the light bulbs, because I believe it's in the Dendera temple. You have to go down and it's a bit of a
Right.
mission to get down and in there, but we slipped down there one evening and that beautiful artwork with the two light bulbs holding together. I think
Right.
you know exactly what I'm talking about because it's very profound. That's the only one that I saw in the whole trip. But I'm guessing that is a symbol of showing compassion for each other and seeing the light within each other. Would you say, William?
Yeah, it's a beautiful interpretation of it. Yeah, absolutely, because it portrays the moment of creation according to the ancient Egyptians. It definitely resembles a light bulb as well as a plasma device. It's like some kind of a plasma tube. And it is a recognition that it's all about the light. And the only way to step into the light and experience the light is through that enhanced sense of compassion. So yeah, you can easily interpret it that way.
And
Yeah.
and of course the compassion isn't just for others in our day-to-day life, right? And of course it's easy to be compassionate for those we love that are slightly irritable from time to time, and we move through it. And then you got to be compassionate to those who blatantly, aren't on your team, so to speak, and you've got to love thy enemy. And I think the final step is to be compassionate to ourselves, because
Yeah.
I think very often people are their own worst enemy, and their internal dialogue and the story that they tell themselves about what they did or didn't do as to what this means they are as a person, that compassion for the self, being the observer, is a real key to develop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that about the first commandment or that Jesus speaks of in terms of love and loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, your soul, loving your neighbor as yourself. I mean, that is quantum entanglement. That is quantum principles right there. And that story, that saying comes out of a question by a rich man who asked Jesus, hey, what's it take to get to heaven? I mean, geez, I've given you guys hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, and isn't that enough to get me through? And
Mm.
this is when Jesus replies that it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the message here that follows then is, well, how do you get through the eye of the needle? And the answer is love with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. It really is that simple. And he goes on to say in that same teaching, Jesus does, that he's referring ultimately to our perfection, to becoming perfect light beings. That was one of the goals of the Essenes, the Jewish mystics, the tribe out of which Jesus and Mary Magdalene emerged. They wanted to become perfect light humans. And that word perfect in our culture has one level of meaning, but to them, perfection meant to become more whole, more holy, more complete, and especially more compassionate. And so that is the path ultimately to the perfect light body.
And Mary used to prepare the special wine, right, which would help with these beautiful,
So,
profound downloads. Tell us a little about
so
these special wine that they had.
it's so interesting. I mean, beginning in the 1970s, we really didn't know a lot about their use of entheogens and plant medicine, and this this whole access of tools until the first deciphering or translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, of course, are the manuscripts, the teachings of the Essenes, the Jewish mystic tribe out of which Magdalene and Jesus emerged. And they were discovered in 1947, but weren't translated and released to the public until the 1970s, when John Marco Allegro, who was the academic at Manchester University in England, was the first translator. He puts out a book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And he says, hey, y'all, the Essenes, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, they were an Amanita muscaria mushroom cult. Their original sacrament, that which would have been used at the Last Supper, was entheogenic. It was psychedelic. And it was probably based on the Amanita muscaria mushroom, although new evidence has also come out from academics that followed this line of research, recognizing that the wine that they were drinking was also hallucinogenic. It was called fortified wine, and it was infused with hallucinogenic substances. And what they were trying to do with this was not get high, but to open the heart, open the consciousness centers within, allow that portal, that light to open, and allow the disciples to enter into that higher vibrational state, the kingdom of heaven, which is within, and exist as a fully activated being of light and love. That is explicitly stated in these texts, and it's mind-boggling to think about. But once you pierce the veil of this that has been put over the traditional Catholic and Christian understanding of the Eucharist as this cardboard wafers and this fake wine, that's just all kind of a hijacking of the original tradition. And now we're realizing what they were actually doing, and now we too can participate in that sacrament. It's bringing a profound shift to our understanding of who these figures were.
It's pretty deep, right?
I
It's
love
like
it.
the sacrament could be having a cookie and drinking some psychedelic brew to connect to Christ,
And the
body of Christ, right?
programmed it just to be wine and bread. Like, it's like fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Christ is the light. Is the name Christ means the anointed one, and they were anointing with these sacred oils. They would put the oils on their eyes. They would put them in their ear where the blood vessels are closest to the skin. One of my favorite examples of this is Saint Francis of Assisi, who had this famous bowl haircut where they would shave off the top of their head, and then they would pour the psychoactive oil, the hallucinogenic oil, into the razor burn, and it would seep in, cross over the blood-brain barrier, and they would have this psychedelic experience. Well, just imagine how different Sunday school would be and how much different it would be going to church on Christmas and Easter if you knew you were going to be tripping with your fellow brethren and experiencing this sacrament. It's no joke. This is what they were doing, and now we're even getting their recipes. These are in the text. The anointing oil of Moses, for example, and King David involved cannabis. We have direct evidence of this now. We have found their original temples of the Israelites, and we have found the cannabis resin all over the altar. We know this is what they were doing. And so now the opportunity that we have is to recreate those experiences within the context of understanding this is all about awakening the light body, feeding the light body, assisting with our ascension. It's not about, again, just having a good time on Saturday night. It's about deeply connecting with our true self.
I love it because, plant medicine for us, we got led to it. That was our first healing. Like, we didn't even do breath work or yoga or ice baths before we went to Costa Rica, did plant medicine. And it really did send us into another dimension and connect us to extraterrestrials, galactic beings, knowing thyself as the light body and old soul. And it really helped us. And little did we know what was going to happen, obviously, in the ceremony. We had to let go of fears and all the rest of it and do the inner work to get the reward. But I would never change our story and our awakening from that.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And more what I'm seeing in my role as I develop what I call my Star Walkers program is here in Phoenix, there's an enormous plant medicine community, enormous, thousands of people. And the more and more I talk with people, they're telling me, yeah, I had this experience with this light being. And well, one the other day, the guy's like, yeah, I'm in this lab, and this guy's got this long beak, and I don't know who he is, but boy, he was doing something within this lab. He was mixing up some potions. I went and got a statue off my shelf, and I said, do you happen to look like this? He's like, that's him. I said, okay, that was the Egyptian god Thoth that you were having a conversation with. Okay. And had he not known that, he would have kind of just walked on by the potential significance of that moment. So what I'm doing now is working within the plant community, medicine community. So what we really need is a database of these experiences, and
Mm.
people have a way to record those so that they can connect the dots of who they're interacting with. What is a wormhole? What does it mean to project your consciousness to another world? How can I heal myself in these realms? And gosh, is the Egyptian gods are practically the chamber of commerce of the plant medicine world. They're in everybody's journey and they're part of this. But if you don't know who they are, then you can't fully take advantage of what that experience is. So that's one area that I'm presently working in, is to help to create this database and to help people to kind of connect the dots with their plant medicine experiences.
I love that, because a lot of where we've come from, the shamans, they don't really know this elevated information because they're just serving. We've all got our roles at different levels
Right.
of the ascension journey, and I just love that. Even the name Star Walkers, it just activates something in me again. Like these words, the frequencies that get projected.
Yeah.
Look out! Look out!
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I like to say that, yeah, we are all star seeds, but the object is really to become a star walker, okay? Because the seed has the concept of something that's got potential. And what we want to really be visualizing and recognizing is, okay, where as this seed turns into a tree, what's going to be the fruit of that tree? In other words, where am I going with this? Where can I go with this? Can I connect with these star walkers from other worlds? Yes, you can. And you're looking for them and they're looking for you. And what's happening now is that we have all this access to many of these medicines that have been simply unavailable. Many of them weren't available 10 years ago. I mean, here in America, there were probably, I'm guessing, what I got this from the Canadian Psychedelic Association. They estimate that there's well over 1,000 ayahuasqueros in America right now. And that was a year ago. So there's probably 1,400 by now, people that have had the experience. Now they want to become servers themselves. And so what's happening is that this is, as I mentioned earlier, a tsunami is just rising. And it's really all around the world. And as this tsunami rises, it's going to just cause this just enormous cascade of compassion, awakened consciousness, and just enlightened consciousness to suddenly pour over the planet. And in my view, it's going to be irrepressible. They won't be able to stop it.
Oh, I got chills. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the channelings of the law of one mentioned, the avian bird-like beings bringing through a collective consciousness wisdom, where instead of the individual consciousness, once they reach sixth dimensional consciousness, they become one. And
Yeah.
in it, they talk about the point, the shift, where as individuals, you have a moment where you go from being service to self into
Yeah.
service to others, seeing that
Right.
we're all one. Do
Yeah.
you feel like that's like the start of the awakening for people, when that switch sort of switches over for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like we're genetically programmed for this to occur. And again, going back to the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians, when they talk about these beings uh, tinkering with our DNA, this is the purpose of it, is for ascension. All the stories bear that out. And so it makes sense that as we use these various substances to switch realities, that we're not just switching realities in terms of what we see, it's also what we experience and feel. And that sense of connectedness and oneness is most definitely one of the earliest and first switches that seems to get tripped in this experience.
And we access, I guess, our greatest power, right? Which is our free will, our
Exactly.
power to choose. And
Exactly.
I love the point that you have said about ascension, is it's not exactly a free ride. You in a way, you need to be like involved, use your free will to involve, and that is a real gift, right? Like our free will.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I, again, as I've watched a couple of these ascension waves, as watch it rise, there was a time, I mean, where people thought it would be a spontaneous transformation. And for some, it will feel spontaneous, but for others, it goes back to what Jesus' little brother James used to teach: faith without works is dead. Okay. So having faith that, yeah, there's going to be this spontaneous ascension is one thing, but then saying, I'm going to kind of cover myself by actively doing some things here
That
to
just
accelerate my
right in
ascension.
there.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just,
the path that I'm on.
I
And I
love
see
it.
people,
Yes.
yourself and so many others saying, yeah, this is, and that's what makes it worthwhile too. So,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's like the Star Walker term, the Light Warrior term I used. It's like we are the earlier waves, and our role
yeah,
is to hold stable for the big tsunami that we all feel's coming. You speak to people in this community, they're like, something's coming, something's coming. I don't know what it is, right? Something's coming, right? And I think, and of course, the next bit is, what can I do? You know, what's my role? And I think through this conversation, it becomes obvious that our role is to be the best version of ourselves that we can within ourselves, every thought, every action, every feeling, because that affects a collective consciousness. And
yeah.
that in itself is a massive contribution, but then also we can be our authentic self, right? And express.
That's exactly right. And it's that recognition that we already are this ascended being, and now we're just sort of catching up with ourselves. That's another important part of it. And because, yeah, it is a path of perfection and being the best that we can, but it's also accepting that we already are that. We are whole and complete. And now we can begin to exude that and live from that perspective. I like to use the analogy of a crystal ball. It's like we're each, our bones are crystal, we're largely crystalline beings, and we talk about becoming crystalline beings. And it's not until you tap that ball and start going around the rim that it starts attaining its frequency. Okay. The ball could spontaneously start to ring or to hum, but that work is mandatory. If you don't pick up that wand and strike the bowl and the action of going around the rim, that's what brings up the frequency and the vibration, and that's where the work comes in. And on that is an idea. I mean, you're such a beautiful couple, and to me, it's like the interplay of the male and female. We can't really talk in those terms anymore, but
It's
these
fine for us. You
aspects
don't need to call us them or them.
yeah. So, but it's the idea of that unity of those aspects of ourselves, getting them to work together. We all have that one part of ourselves that says, yeah, I'm into ascension. And then the other part says, well, no, we got to go to work on Monday. What are you talking about? You know, chill out. And it's getting them both saying yes to the same thing. And what we want those aspects of ourselves to say yes to is ultimately becoming as whole and wholly complete and compassionate as possible as the root to getting what it is that we want for ourselves, and from the mundane level to the high spiritual level. And the bowl analogy helps us in this regard because the wand is masculine in symbolism and the bowl is feminine. So by uniting those in the same action, we're actually uniting those aspects of ourselves. And now they're both saying yes to the same thing, producing the most beautiful vibration from within ourselves possible. And then that sending those ripples out is what ultimately transforms our life as well as the life of everyone we come into contact with.
Love it.
The ripple effect is just
The
beautiful.
ripple effect. Yeah. Yeah.
So one step up from this, William, galactic ascension. I think we're all excited about a galactic ascension and connecting with the galactic beings on a more physical plane, perhaps, or non-physical plane. I know a lot of people around the world are connecting, euphorically at this time. What's your take on all of this ascension globally for humanity, and then galactic ascension?
Well, yeah, I mean, I am very much rooted in the mystical Christian tradition. So I study, of course, the ancient Egyptian and Sumerian, Tibetan, and others, but I do a lot of work in the Jesus and Mary Magdalene area. And so that means I have an interest in ideas like the second coming and Book of Revelation and the 144,000 and some of those ideas, that these are terms that are utilized in the ascension community, and often they don't know that it's rooted in Christian mysticism. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. But that said, one of the most important things that happens at the time of the second coming is not only this incredible explosion of what we would think of as Christ consciousness and plugging into that, the Christ Magdalene type of consciousness, but also Earth will, according to the book of Revelation, will be a gathering place for the elect from across the universe. And when you read that, you think, well, what does that mean? And then all of a sudden you start to think of it in terms of a galactic activation and a collective ascension on Earth with beings from various star systems suddenly manifesting and gathering on Earth. That's what we're talking about now in the ascension community, is beings from, oh, I talked with these beings from the Pleiades, I talked to the Syrians, or I talked, oh, the beings from Andromeda came in. This is the gathering of the elect. They are coming here now. Perhaps they've always been here, and what we are now doing is developing the eyes to see them and to connect with these star walkers. And so that's tremendously exciting to me, and evidence that, yeah, this collective ascension is happening. And ultimately what it's about is connecting Earth and Soul to this, whatever you want to think of it, a federation, a collective of star systems where this teaching is taught. And we're in that right now. And in the coming years, what we're going to see is more and more evidence of the existence of these beings and increased interactions with them.
I love it. You're talking our language. We love the overall, looking at the overall arching message for humanity, the raising of the vibration, the journey, the healing, then the galactic connection. It's all so very exciting. We loved this conversation. So good.
Truly. And again, it's rooted not in new kind of perspectives. This is, humanity's been talking about this for a long time. But they also speak of these times, such as what we're in right now, where suddenly it just goes galactic. And that's exactly where we're at.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing that the galaxy seems to be helping us as well? You know, the solar flares are popping, the Schumann resonance is super, super high. It seems like Mother Earth herself is elevating and helping to facilitate this shift in consciousness too, right?
Yeah, I agree, Pete. I like to point out, as a matter of fact, that just 100 years ago, 1924, 1920s, when scientists, astronomers, the ordinary person looked into the night sky, they thought certain that the stars that they saw was the totality of the universe. And then an astronomer named Edwin Hubble started looking at some of the photographs, the first photographs that they took out into the Milky Way. They take a picture, and he's looking at a smudge of light in one of these pictures. And all the astronomers are saying, it's just a nebula, there's only the Milky Way, that's it. And Hubble says, no, I don't think so. So he hot rods his telescope, puts in a better camera, takes another picture, and finds out there's not one galaxy, there's two. And we called it Andromeda. That was 100 years ago. We thought there were two galaxies. Now we know there's as many as 1 trillion in the known universe. Okay, that's 100-year shift. I mean, that to me is evidence that we are suddenly plugged into something far grander than anything we could have conceived, maybe even as soon as, or as near as 100 years ago. And I do think, as you're saying there, it is directed from the galactic center, because now we have so much focus on it, the center of the galaxy. And ever since 2012, with the Maya prophecies of pulses and emerging from the galactic center, moving through the sun, we are clearly in this time of transformation. We are beginning to become a civilization that isn't solely focused on our own solar system, and we're focusing on other nearby star systems and understanding these beings are coming and going from Sirius, Pleiades, Orion, elsewhere. And now we're also becoming more galactic center oriented as well. That's profound. I mean, that is just, from a spiritual as well as a scientific perspective, just leaves us breathless, really.
Oh,
We
love it. Love it.
love this
And we
conversation.
love how you speak with such integrity. You really ground in this information without it making it sound so woo-woo, you know, you really are a light. And we just want to thank you so much for all your great work, being the
Thank
way
you.
shower, being strong in your beliefs and what you've researched. It's an honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. I hope it's the first of many to come.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, William.
Thank you.